There's a lot that gets labeled a penetration test. Some of it's solid, good work that helps you reduce risk, pass your audit, give your clients confidence, etc. Some of it, not so much. So if you've ever read through a report and thought, this feels a little off, you're probably right. It might look professional, it might tick the compliance checkbox even, but not all penetration tests are created equal, and some can actually give you a false sense of security and definitely not be worth your money. In this video, we're going to walk through the 5 different types of bad penetration tests. We'll talk about the warning signs, the patterns, the red flags that show up, even when a test may look legit on the surface. So whether you're evaluating a provider or reviewing a recent report, this will help you separate the real security insights from someone who just went through the motions. All right, so the first one I have here is probably the most common, also the most low effort. It's the scanner dump, where you're getting a report that's dressed up like a penetration test. The report might look good, but at the end of the day, somebody ran a vulnerability scanner and threw it into their template. So you're basically getting, a Nessus scan, except rather than the Tenable Nessus logo, you're getting that company's logo on the cover page. So I went out there, I found, through some Googling, some different sample reports. You can even Google around and find real reports that, for whatever reason, people have put online. And there were a lot that fit this bill of being a scanner dump report. Even the samples where people are putting their best foot forward and showing their work came down to just a rebranded Nessus report, basically. So this first one I found here is a sample report. Here we are on page 10. We've gotten to the executive summary. And you can see that there's a nice little graph, and then there's this big old table full of IP addresses and then vulnerabilities belonging to each of those IP addresses. So we go through 2, 4, 6 pages of that before we see there are 44 total vulnerabilities here. Then there's another 2, 4, 6 pages of kind of filler or a demonstration of what they would have for a retest report. Although this one's all zeroed out, so I'm not really sure why it was in the report, except maybe just as a demonstration of what a retest would look like with them. So go straight into the vulnerabilities here. So now here we are at the section that they call detailed report. And this is straight up copied from Nessus, including the names here. So the vulnerability name of this first one is Microsoft SQL Server Unsupported Version Detection Remote Check. So that right there is a dead giveaway that it was copied verbatim from Nessus, because, if I'm naming a vulnerability that I found myself, I'm not including, parentheses remote check at the end. That's something that was just straight up copied out of the vulnerability scanner. Another thing you see here is that it's rated CVSS 10, so that's as high as it gets. They're saying that this is basically a critical vulnerability. This is as high can be. The description is, according to its self-reported version number, it's no longer supported. So this is an old unsupported Microsoft SQL Server version running. And then as proof of concept, you don't see that they attempted any exploitation, but that they just use Nmap to confirm that Nmap agreed with Nessus. So Nmap's version detection says that it's SQL Server 2008 R2. That agreed with what Nessus saw, so that's their proof of concept on this one. They didn't try any exploitation. They didn't see if it is or is not exploitable, or if it were, what they could do with it, what sort of information might be at risk, and to demonstrate the impact. None of that was done. This was just copying Nessus results into their own little table here. And you can even see, although, Nessus isn't mentioned anywhere, that the reference links are all nessus.org. And, you could Google this text, and the first thing that would come up would be the Tenable website saying this exactly. So after seeing that first one, I started to wonder, how are they assigning severity ratings? My suspicion is that the severity rating is going to be whatever Nessus said, just copied verbatim. But they do have a table here up at, the kind of beginning of the report that explains it. And it says right here, critical is anything from 9.0 to 10 on the CVSS scale. And they describe that as exploitation of the vulnerability may result in complete compromise of the database server or application. Okay. And it can have a major impact on business. That seems fair enough. But then go down to high, and high is CVSS score of 7 to 8.9. And I just noticed it said here that vulnerability is easily exploitable. I would assume that if something is critical, it may be even more easily exploitable on this scale, yet no exploitation was attempted. And I actually don't know for sure if this would be super easy. You know, sometimes you find out-of-date software and it definitely contains vulnerabilities. And if it's unsupported, like in this instance, any new vulnerabilities discovered will never be patched because they don't do that anymore. It's unsupported. But you would think if you're calling something easily exploitable or critical vulnerability, there would be some attempt at exploiting it and to show, yes, it was, and here's what we were able to get. Or, you know, under these circumstances, it wasn't exploitable. So yeah, you still need to upgrade it, but just here's the context that we weren't able to get in after all, despite it being super out of date. Let's keep going and looking at the report. So here's another one, exactly like the first one, basically. Critical vulnerability saying unsupported Windows OS. And then again, you see this telltale sign here, parentheses remote. That's just straight out of Nessus. You know, here they found an unsupported Windows 7 operating system on the network, didn't try to exploit it. You would think that would be kind of an easy, fun thing for them to be like, all right, let's go after that Windows 7. Let's demonstrate impact. Let's see what's on it. Usually people with the hacker mindset are very curious to know what it is. They're not just satisfied with, well, it's Windows 7, let's move on. But they want to be like, all right, let's get into it. Let's see what we can do with it. And that, you know, in my opinion, on especially this sort of network penetration test would be a lot of the value is not just saying, hey, here's an audit of missing patches and old software, but also I'm going to help you prioritize by showing you what's important and what's not important. It doesn't mean that, you know, they're going in and doing necessarily malicious things. They could be doing benign things and just kind of demonstrating what a malicious attacker could do without actually harming the system. But you can see that on this scanner dump, none of that was done. So I started wondering, are they even calling this a penetration test? Or am I wasting my time looking at something that's very clearly just a scanner, you know, report? So I went back up and I did see they called it a vulnerability assessment and penetration testing report. They also have their methodology here as what I think amounts to the penetration testing execution standard, which is information gathering, vulnerability detection, information analysis and planning, attack and penetration, privilege escalation, results analysis, and reporting. That's a good methodology in my opinion, but where did they stop here? I'm not certain they did any information gathering except maybe tell me what the IP address range is and we're going to scan it. Vulnerability detection seems to have been done, you know, only by the scanner from what we've seen so far. Analysis and planning, I don't know, whatever. But then attack and penetration, here is a big one where we see they did not do it at all. Even though it says here in their methodology, these are all the things they're going to do. This was not done. And then they never, you know, if you don't do that, you're never going to get to privilege escalation. And I think another, maybe what they're talking about with results analysis, what can you do after you've escalated privileges, or if you weren't able to escalate privileges? Like, is there important information or keys to the kingdom or all sorts of loot on this box that you can demonstrate to somebody? It's like, hey, this was really bad. You need to patch this, not just it's Windows 7, patch it. And then reporting, you know, again, that's basically all done for them. They just threw the Nessus results into their own template. So yeah, in this scenario, they are calling this a penetration test. They are laying out a penetration testing methodology, yet all we've seen so far is scanner results. So I'll run through a few more. I won't take too long, but here are more and some more signs. So we have another high vulnerability, something about the DNS server amplification DDoS. So you can, trick a DNS server into sending another machine a large amount of information by you only sending it a tiny amount of information. So it amplifies your request, and that could be theoretically used to denial of service somebody. I wouldn't expect somebody to actually denial of service something to demonstrate it, but you can at least show, hey, look, I sent this machine 10 bytes or whatever. I'm just making up numbers. And it sent back, 14 pages of information. And it sent it to a machine that I had spoofed and told it to send it to. That would be a decent proof of concept or just demonstration that shows it's possible without actually taking down somebody's server. And then we get into ones here, another high, it's outdated SSL, but here's another sign that it's just straight out of Nessus. You see the same thing basically repeated over and over again. So SSL medium strength ciphers are supported. And then you see here, Poodle, SSL padding, another SSL issue. So it's kind of like they could have taken this and combined it all into one, like, hey, there's a lot of SSL issues. Here's overall how to attack that issue. But instead, you're going to see each one of them repeated over and over again. So, we're getting into the medium severities here. And here's another one. After we've already seen, I think, 2, SSL certificate cannot be trusted. SSL protocol deprecated. They're using 1.1. SSL self-signed. RC4 used. Wrong host name. So now I think that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6, 7 that we've seen. So we've now seen about 7 different issues that probably say essentially the same thing. It's just each, minute little SSL issue has been broken down into this many different issues rather than an overall, here's a systemic issue, here's how to attack it. And then we get, let's see, 13, and here's another DNS one, so that makes 3 that are kind of generally the same thing, repeated over and over again because this is a scanner dump. Another SSL one here in a low severities, and I think that's the end of this one. After this one low severity issue, the report just cut off, it was done, that was the end. I don't think there was a single unique sentence or any analysis written by a penetration tester in this report. It was literally just a dump of Nessus in their own template and that big old graph we saw. All right, so we've now seen what that looks like. Here's how to spot it. Exact wording from Nessus in a branded report. We saw a lot of that. No exploitation. The findings almost always say, according to its banner or according to the self-reported version number, and that is as far as they looked into it. So duplicate or very similar issues, we saw a bunch of those. Includes info level findings that aren't actually issues. Severity ratings will be copied exactly from the scanner without justification. A lot of these will include clear false positives. And, above all, there's no sign that the tester understood the app or the environment at all. They could be scanning anything. They probably couldn't tell you what the app does, what the company does, might not be familiar with the industry that you're in at all. They just loaded up a scanner, hit scan, and then ported it all into their branded report. So I mentioned earlier that these scanner dump reports are probably the most common type of bad pen test, and I think that's true. I don't think I understood how common. I have a client who I was in his office one day, and I was new to this client and we were kicking off our first engagement, and I thought it was their first engagement ever. But I look over on his bookshelf and I see a binder labeled penetration test. And I'm like, that's weird. I thought you guys hadn't got a penetration test before. And he's like, well, we paid for one. We didn't basically get it. And, this was a guy who liked to print everything off. So he, pulls the binder off the shelf and plops it on the desk and opens it up, and it is a thick binder of paper that he had printed off. And I start flipping through it, and I'm like, almost instantly after the cover page, I see these are Nessus results, just like we just saw here in this presentation. It's like there is almost nothing here that isn't verbatim Nessus results. And then I got to the end of that, after about half the binder, because they included the informationals and everything. And then it goes on to this other engagement they had bought of a firewall audit. And basically they had done the same thing there, where they had just printed off. It almost looked like they had literally, done copies on a copy machine of the book talking about their firewall. It's like, I don't remember if it was like Palo Alto or what, but it's like, scanning out a textbook and be like, oh, here is what you were supposed to do here. And, I guess a little bit of effort went into that, but it still seemed like they were allergic to using their own words and putting in their own analysis. So like, well, let's just find a book and, say what they say to do. And, the client did not find it useful at all. I don't think they read the whole thing. They weren't able to go through the whole thing. They just learned, we're never using that company again. We got screwed on that one. And, luckily they found me and I was able to help them out. And they were very happy with the product I gave them that year. And it moves us on to the next type of bad report, which I've called the Zerg Rush or Fluffpocalypse Now. And you'll see why I called it that, even though it's, silly names. But they end up being things that seem like they were done by someone who thinks they're being paid by the word. There'll be a lot of fluff, a lot of just irrelevant stuff. It seems like they're trying to take up space. A lot of times they don't have very much to show in a report, so they think they're going to make up for it with page count. So you might see paragraphs upon paragraphs that just do not get to the point and do not tell you anything useful. Sometimes I will read a paragraph or two and be like, what was the point in that paragraph? What did it just say? So look out for sample reports that may just be overly wordy without actually saying anything. And, chances are you've found one like this that's just going to throw a bunch of fluff and a lot of jargon and things like that at you and hope that you're impressed by the word count. Next here, I mentioned jargon and filler. So, we got the fluff, we got the filler like we saw in the last one, but there's also sometimes jargon where they think if they just sound very smart and talk about security in general, you might not notice that a lot of this stuff doesn't really apply to your report or to your network that was tested or your web app that was tested, whatever. It's just that they're talking about generalities and hypotheticals and yeah, maybe this could be done, but they didn't check. They didn't do proof of concept or exploitation to actually see if it's possible, but they are going to talk about it in the report to take up space and to increase that page count. All right, next we have, this was another real one I saw. So this was in a real report that I found on Google. I feel like they're just trying to dazzle you with graphs here. These graphs are pretty hard to read. Sometimes it's because the text is so small. Like I think I blew this up beyond 100% and it's still a little hard to read. And then this other one is just like doing way too much. It's hard to tell, what it is they're even trying to present here because you have like, circles upon circles and it's like early models of the universe or something here, concentric circles. I don't know. I think that they did this probably just to take up a page and look impressive. It doesn't really show much. And, even here in the graph, the smallest pie piece, I can't even read what it says. So this isn't helpful to me if I had bought this report or bought this engagement. All right. And then, let's see. More graphs. They had another page with these big concentric circle graphs. They almost kind of look identical to me, I think. Yeah, I think they are identical. So that same graph is in there 3 times. So that's another one. I don't get why this is here. I don't think anybody's going to read this graph and understand it. It's just there, to be like, look at our fancy graph. That's it. All right, how to spot this bad pen test. So buzzword soup and jargon, paragraphs with no substance, charts and graphs with no context. Again, just like the scanner dump, generic remediation guidance where, they probably didn't do very much to get to know the environment or to get hands-on and try to exploit things, so they don't understand what the system's doing or the ins and outs of it. So they're not going to be able to give you tailored remediation guidance. So they're just going to probably go with what was in their scanner. Overuse of passive voice and hypotheticals. Something's critical, but they didn't show you that it's critical. They're just saying, it could be exploitable. It probably is, but we didn't do it. And then one size fits all language, again, where they didn't seem to understand your company, your app, your network, your industry. This could have been written for any app anywhere. Nothing in there is tailored to you. And it just seems like in this one, it is the scanner dump, but they're a little more aware that it's a scanner dump. So they are throwing in these graphs and this wording and this flowery language to try to like dazzle you and be like, all right, it's not just a scanner dump. Look at all this extra stuff we did. So the next one, I like to call it the LOL we pwned you. And this one's different from the other ones we've talked about so far, because usually in these, they're actually good hackers. They are getting hands-on. They are doing exploitation. They are doing proof of concept. They are technically sound. I like to call them sometimes like the SEAL Team 6 of hacking. Like they're going to come in and kick your door down and throw some flashbangs in there, and everyone's going to be confused, and they're going to go get the loot and get out, and they're done. Like they got their package. They, did what they came to do. They messed everything up, and it's just a mess when they leave. But now they're going to just go to the bar and tell stories about it. They're not really there to help you figure out what went wrong and how to fix it. And again, it's not going to be very like comprehensive. It's going to be, we kicked down this one door and we came in and we ransacked the place and grabbed some sensitive information and left. So, I would prefer a method of testing where it shows this depth of coverage. And, it's great that these people have super amazing technical skills, and those should be showcased. But also I like to provide breadth of coverage where it's like, not only are we going to come in and, just like wreck shop and show you how bad it is in this one area, but we're going to try to show you all of the areas that you can improve on. So in the writing here, a lot of times in the report will be super narrative. And it does, there are people that are good at this. I'm not trying to smear everybody. A narrative report's not a bad thing, but there's a particular type of sort of, smugness or ego-driven reporting that is very common with this type of, highly skilled individual who's great at hacking, bad at explaining. It's that type of, haha, we pwned you, you're insecure, that you're going to be seeing in the report, more so than a collaborative, how do we help you be more secure? Let's see. A lot of times the remediation guidance on a bad type of these reports will come down to, I guess, more kind of ego and smugness, like rebuild it and try not to suck this time. Obviously not going to be said like that, but things like your constraints, your budget, your team will kind of be ignored in favor of very like idealistic, you need to rewrite the app and do it this time with security in mind. Or another one I see from time to time is, essentially buy more stuff from us. Like a strategic reassessment of the application's design and development practices may offer a more sustainable path forward than remediation alone. So, I wonder who would do that for them. Organizations facing similar challenges have benefited from involving specialists who provide structured guidance around more secure design principles, threat modeling, and development process improvements. So essentially, while maybe that's not bad information, they are just saying, the way to remediate this is to buy more of our company's services. And maybe they do provide some good services, but they've also already bought this penetration testing engagement from you, and they expect more substance in their report than just, use us more. So how to spot this type of bad pen test? So the findings were technically accurate and probably even impressive, but they often lack actionable details. So you're not able to easily recreate these things yourself. You're not able to really show your engineers what happened, and they're not able to maybe figure out exactly how it was done and how to recreate it in development or in stage, and they're kind of just relying on the fact that it happened and let's try to do better, but they don't know exactly what happened or how to do better. A lot of times it's like these reports are written for other hackers, and maybe sometimes literally it's written for other hackers because they're just going to go brag about how maybe they wouldn't name names. It'd be like, oh, a company in the financial sector hired us last month and we did this, that, and the other. And it's just going to be their next con talk. And that was really what they had in mind when they were writing the report. It's just like, how bad can we put this so that I can brag about it later? Again, not everybody. There are good versions of this too, where people are technically amazing and good at explaining all these things and reporting. This is a specific type of bad pen test. And in that specific type, you probably will see root cause analyses are more vague criticisms than, actual analysis. Remediation advice is abstract, idealistic, and ignores operational constraints. And the takeaway is usually you're insecure. The same client I talked about earlier who had this scanner dump sort of report on their bookshelf and showed me this big old binder, they encountered a company sort of like this as well, where they were looking for different bids and doing their due diligence and talking to different vendors, including myself, who ended up, ultimately working with them. But they told me about another that they had a call with, where they got on the call, explained the scope of their very large network, and they ran a Windows shop, so they had AD, and just talked about it in general. And the people are like, oh yeah, that doesn't sound bad for us. I think we'll probably get domain admin within about 15 minutes, and then we'll just spend the rest of the week writing the report. And he's like, well, that sounds cool, but that's probably not what I'm looking for. Like, I'd like to spend the day with you doing that, and that sounds fun, but I don't see how that would be super helpful to me, that I got 15 minutes worth of work and maybe one attack scenario to fix until next year when you do it again and find attack scenario number 2. Like, I'm not happy with that pace of things. So I was surprised to hear that. I didn't know that people were that upfront and honest about like, oh yeah, we're just going to go in there and, do a little bit of work, wreck things, be done real quick, and then we'll write the report for you. And this will be a real quick turnaround. Like, I guess that was their kind of selling point. It's like, we'll be done so fast. But that wasn't what they were looking for. Not, here's how you improve. All right, next up, I have what I call the bait and switch, which this one is, you may be sold a engagement from like the biggest, baddest hacker, or somebody who's been doing this for a long time and just amazing. They're doing, con talks and they're writing blogs, and you may be familiar with them, and that's what you're sold, and that's who's on the calls. But then it gets passed off to a junior tester or even outsourced, and might not have their name on it at the end, might still have this dude's name on it. And, you're kind of bait and switched there. Like, you were sold this big, like, amazing hacker, and you got somebody kind of working under him, maybe with a little bit of supervision. So one way to spot this is, here's the handoff to junior tester. You may see, well, here's an issue. Doesn't seem like they went very far into it. If this guy really is, some master, offensive security expert, they might have done a little more. Meanwhile, you're getting the work of somebody who's kind of just getting into this. And nothing against junior testers. And, I was there at one point, and I appreciate everybody who, held my hand and taught me things along the way. But that's the model that it should be. You should be included, but not just thrown into the deep end. Here, this is your engagement now, run it, even though it was sold as I'm going to do it. But, more as like, here's backup. Here's, somebody who's going to look at it a different way than somebody who's been in the industry for years and years. And, they're going to approach it with fresh eyes and a different outlook, and they're going to learn along the way. So in this example here, I have like, the classic cross-site scripting, and they found it, and all they did was show you that they can pop up an alert box. And again, I think that an alert box is good because it's visual. It shows you that JavaScript was executed. You can't exactly see something running in the background. So you might show, hey, here's a visual, indicator that JavaScript ran, and we were able to do that from your web app. But you shouldn't stop there. If there's ways to steal cookies or pop up a modal that makes it look like, a login page and show that you could phish somebody that way, those are the type of things you should be doing. You should be trying to weaponize and show what an attacker would do with whatever you discovered, not just, here's an alert box, let's move on. So that would be one example of, it's like not a bad finding, but maybe they didn't go the extra mile that you would have expected being sold the engagement from, some cream of the crop, great offensive security red teamer or something. Another is, maybe handoff to offshore or pen testing by proxy. Unfortunately, I've known of companies that will hire people from all over the world and not disclose that, and even lead their customers into thinking that it's all being done, in America. There's nothing wrong with living anywhere in the world. I've known great penetration testers from all over. That's fine, but I think it's important that you don't lie and that you be transparent. And if that's fine with a client, it's like, all right, somebody's testing from Uruguay, that's fine. They're probably just as good as anybody else. But if there is some sort of, regulation or compliance that says it needs to be inside the United States, don't break that trust and have somebody connect through a proxy in, New York or Miami or something and pretend that they are. And I've seen that. Early warning sign would be when you're doing a demo or a walkthrough or a sales call, even just ask who would be doing the testing. And, if they can't give you an answer, give you a name, that may be a little suspicious. I know sometimes the sales process kicks off and then once it's done, it goes to the managers and they distribute it. But, they should at least have some idea maybe what team will be doing it and throw out some names of managers and you could check up. You can also see a lot of times there'll be inconsistent language and grammar throughout the report. You may see that the first half of the report is just like immaculately written and great grammar because it was the standard language. And then from there, it wasn't very good. Maybe the person didn't have a great grasp of English. And it just shows you, it's like, I don't think that this was completely written by the same person. Or maybe it wasn't written by the person that I talked to on the kickoff call. This was definitely written by somebody with, completely different style. Sections may be written in different styles. So another one is going to be like if you ask a question during the test, there might be delays like, oh, we need to check with the team. You get a call back or an email back, 2 or 3 days from then. It might be because people are on such different time zones. You might see overly formal or awkward phrasing that sounds either like it was written by like a translator, ChatGPT, or just somebody who learned English very formally. The screenshot might show the operating system being used in a different language or different time zone. And sometimes the report authors won't be listed at all, or it might be a name that you've never seen before. They weren't on the kickoff call. Again, nothing wrong with people all over the world can do penetration tests, but if you're specifically need one done from your home country, from within your borders, that's what you should be getting if that's what they say you're going to get. So the last one I have here is automated platforms. So this is one that might be sold as pen test as a service or automated pen test platform. And again, not that these are awful, but it's not the same as a manual penetration test. You're probably not, at this point anyway, going to get the same value from this as you would from a human attacker mindset-led manual penetration test. So a lot of times it'll come down to it's a vulnerability scanner, except now it looks nicer. It now looks modern and Web 3.0 or whatever, rather than old and clunky like a scanner might look that was designed years and years and years ago. And then beyond that, it's a lot of times you get a dashboard with nothing configured. You log in for the first time just having bought this product and you're ready to kick off your pen test and get your compliance checkbox taken care of. And you get in there and everything's blank. And you realize you just bought yourself another job and you're basically the one that now has to configure the scanner and put everything in and maybe even tune some rules and then kick it off and hope it worked and then interpret the results. And all that, you just bought another full-time job rather than buying a pen test that will last 2 or 3 weeks and then be sent back to you a completed report. And then also we have the problem of, even if this isn't just a reskinned scanner and it does have some of its own logic, there's no attacker mindset there. There's scheduled scans, no creativity, no context, just, a machine popping off rules. And this is what I do in this case, and this is what I do in that case. It's not really the, freeform jazz type thinking that an attacker might have in the moment of, let's try this or let's try that. The depth of an exploit and chaining different things together is probably not going to come across in a pen test as a service type dashboard. Another one is retesting. So with manual, attacker, consultant-led pen tests, they understand those issues that they wrote up. And then when you attempt remediation and send it back and be like, hey, check and make sure I did this correctly, they can go in and check and be like, oh yeah, you did it right. It now is remediated and I'll mark that on the report. Or no, you didn't do it right. It's not remediated. Here's some advice on how to get it right. Or even something I see a lot is it looks remediated. Maybe the version number has changed or something isn't as immediately obvious now. But if you just switch up how you exploit it, it's still technically there. So be aware of that. That is nuance that a dashboard and a scanner and, pen test as a service is probably not going to see when you're going to get that from a human who understands your app a little bit and understands the vulnerability that they found. With a scanner here or with the dashboard, it's probably going to be, well, run it again and see if it's on the report. If it's not, if it dropped off, assume you're all good, even though it could just be that it's slightly different exploit path now. And you wouldn't know that just from rerunning the scanner and seeing that it's no longer there. We're seeing things being labeled as AI powered now, and not that there's not a lot of impressive AI technology out there and it's accelerating every day, but I see a lot of that basically means it has some generic description rewritten via ChatGPT for you. So instead of getting that scanner output like you're going to get in the scanner dump, you're going to get it thrown through ChatGPT, rewritten, and pasted out into your dashboard, which might be better, but it's probably nothing you couldn't have done yourself. And also, I would expect the output from an actual human to be way better than just generic description plus prompt. And then that's what we're going to throw at you without really any human in the loop seeing, okay, is that actually good? Is it accurate? Does it sound weird? Stuff like that. So overall, I think, the danger here is that this turns into another full-time job for you. If you're needing your web app pen test and you're busy trying to get SOC 2 compliance or HIPAA compliance or whatever, leading an engineering team, you have a million other things to do. The last thing you need is, all right, now go in here, set all this up, import all the assets, whatever, and run the scan, interpret the results, distribute that to your team, whatever. It just is way more work than it would be if you hired human consultants to do the work for you, write the report in a clear, actionable way, and then deliver that to your team and written in their language where, an executive can read it and get a clear overview of risk. A software developer can read it and understand how to fix the issue. You can read it and kind of understand the issues in your engineering team that might have led to it and how to avoid these things next time. And it turns out that a lot of times these platforms, these dashboards are just really nice looking, great marketing, but, not a lot more useful than it would be if you just bought a scanner license for yourself. All right, I think that brings us, nope, it doesn't bring us to the end. Because I knew that people would be like, all right, smart guy, you're picking apart things so much here, but, I bet you can't do any better. Like, what does a good pen test report look like then if you're just going to, lob bombs all day and talk about how bad all of them are? Show me something good. So here are, in my opinion, some questions to ask ahead of time to see if everything feels right, if you're getting good answers back, or if you're seeing any of these red flags that we just talked about in this video. So one of them would be, do you do manual testing? Again, I think most people are going to say yes, even if they don't, just like we saw in that first scanner dump where they talked about, here's our methodology, and maybe one or two of those items were covered and most weren't. But let's see what they say. Are they kind of tripping over themselves when they talk about it? Are they able to provide examples? Or are they saying, no, the dashboard does everything automated? Ask who will be doing the testing. I think it's probably best if the person raises their hand, like, oh, it's me. I'm on the call. I'll be the one doing it. Me and this guy right here. It's a little bit of a red flag. It doesn't, I know people get busy and can't attend every single meeting, or maybe you're going through sales first. So there might be times when the person's not on the call, but they should at least be like, oh yeah, they'll be our, AppSec team, or it's led by this person and we could set up a call with them, at least point you in the right direction or give you an email address or drop a name. And rather than just being like, it's hard to say, rotating cast of people and it could come up. And, if they're trying to get around that and not drop a name, that might be because they don't want you to be suspicious that it's heavily outsourced, or they don't want you to look them up on LinkedIn and see they have, 6 months experience or something like that. Ask the methodology. Again, that's not a perfect thing, because we saw that even the scanner dump said they used a certain methodology, but they didn't. But if they can't tell you, that off the bat is a red flag. They should at least be able to pop off with, we use this methodology, here's a little bit of information about it. We walked through this step, that step, the other step, and, at least be able to explain it, and then hopefully you can hold them to it later. A big one is, can I see a sample report? I think they should be able to send you a report that is indicative of what yours may look like when you're done. Of course, there's going to be different issues in samples and in your report and client to client. But if they send you a report and they're proud of, here is our sample and it's a scanner dump and it has all these signs that we've seen, I would run from that. If you're reading it and there's a lot of analysis and a good executive summary and some technical depth and a lot of different types of issues so that it demonstrates their, abilities, that's a good sign. And that might be a good company to go with. Another one is, how do you define or how do you assign severity? That's another one where you want to hear somebody saying, well, we have this, risk matrix. We use maybe OWASP risk rating methodology. They could even use CVSS if they want. I prefer it that it's in plain English and explained to you. That's why I like, the OWASP risk rating. But I do understand that a lot of people need the CVSS scores to ingest into their tools, or, just it's the way they do things. So there's nothing against including both, including a plain language, plain English description of your risk. What is the likelihood? What is the impact? Also, here is the CVSS score. But overall here, they should be able to explain to you how they do it, and not just, well, we copy whatever comes out of Nessus, or, we just align it to whatever the CVE says or something like that. That just shows a lack of thought on their part. So, you want to know that they have a process for determining it and aren't just trusting that somebody else did the work and now they're just going to go with that. I would ask about retesting. That is one where, are they going to be able to retest individual issues and see if your remediation worked? Or are they going to try to require that you buy a whole new test? Are they going to charge you for that retest? I think free retesting is very common and, are included. And that should be something that perhaps you look for, free/included, or, decently cheap, rather than trying to make you buy a whole nother engagement. Or worse yet, just be like, well, we'll rerun the scan for you and hope it's not there anymore, because that shows you that there's really no human input going into it. And this one kind of goes a little bit into what we talked about with severity, but it's like, do you explain what the findings actually mean for us? And that doesn't mean just, at a high level, explain what this vulnerability is, but, explain what it means for us in our scenario. And then what happens after the report is delivered, I think, just gives you an example of like what their customer service was like. Like, are they going to be like, well, that's it, the rest of it's on you. We kind of disappear? Or do they talk about, well, we do retesting, we help you validate the issues have been fixed, and also if you ever need to reach out for any reason, we're here to help you, and we're in a consultative role, so feel free to ask us questions at any time. Those are usually good signs that if they're quality in that area, they are probably pretty quality in their work as well. Again, not a guarantee. You kind of have to make your own decisions, put things together and see if it feels right or if things feel off. But hopefully this has given you guys some idea of red flags to look for, green flags to look for. And if you're out there looking for a pen test provider, or if you're reading your pen test, you know what you got, or you know what you're getting into. I hope this helps. Anyway, goodbye.